So I'll be honest with you on this today. We're really going to be talking about kind of what the topic is, the truth behind gender ideology. I want to kind of give a historical background to really kind of go at the roots of where did all of this really come from and how has it become so prevalent in our day and age. The third session is going to really be about the church's pastoral response. And so in this session, I really just want to, it's going to be the most, we could say, dense or intellectual, more heady of just teaching you, and that we can all kind of learn first, okay, what is this? What are we really dealing with, this ideology? And then we'll address what the church teaches about all of it in each human person. And then we'll address practicals. Hey, I know someone who's trans, or I have a sibling or a friend. How do I go about this? That will be for the third session, but feel free to take notes. During this session, there's going to be a lot of content that we're going to cover, and we'll have time after to do some Q&A. So let's dive right in. So I usually tell this story. It's by Steven Crowder. He's a popular podcaster and video show host. And Steven Crowder, he's a controversial guy. And one day he goes on a college campus and he sets up a board that on it says, "There are two genders, prove me wrong." And he's just sitting down with a table and college students are gathered around yelling at him, "You're a bigot, you're not inclusive," all of these things. And one man sits down to have a debate with him, to dialogue, and says, "Steven, you have a right to be whoever you want to be." And he says, "Okay, so are you telling me I can literally be anyone I want to be?" He's like, "Yeah, you have that right, Steven. So if I identified as a bobcat, what would you say?" And he says, "Steven, if you truly believe that you're a bobcat, I would hope you're the best bobcat there is out there." And Steven's like, "Okay, we're done here. We can't have a conversation, because are we really gonna, in law, in school, in medicine, have me as a bobcat, or people can be animals?" He's like, "We can't do this." And so what we're really going to address in this gender ideology is that it affects all of us. Legally, medicine, psychology, education, it's going into everything right now. And it's not something that is small as it used to be. But here are some statistics of where we're at today. In 2015, the best studies that have been done, 11% of high schoolers, youth, identified as LGBTQ. 2021, according to the CDC, there was a large-scale study done that 25% are identifying teens LGBTQ. And we've seen a great rise in this really since the boom of social media. And there's another stat that shows that 10%, roughly 10% of teens are identifying as trans. And what do we mean by trans? A person who identifies as trans is claiming to be born in the wrong body. So they might say, "I was born and someone identified me as boy, and it's a boy body, but I'm a girl." There's been quotes of that from people who identify as trans. This is what is now being taught in school systems. Maybe you've seen this image. It's called the genderbread person. So this really is at the heart of gender identity. So what do we mean by ideology? Ideology is a belief system or an idea of a group of people. And the number one thing I want you guys to take away from this is what's happening in the growth of gender ideology. It's not an extension of rights to a small minority. It's not an extension of rights. Rather, it is an anthropology. It's a new vision of what a human being is. It's a new vision of the whole entire universe and who we are before God. That's what's really at stake. And the genderbread person, which is in educational systems, is that your identity, right there, what it has, the brain, the thought, the mind. And so what's happening is your identity is your personality. Well, how many personalities are there? There's 7.88 billion people on this earth. That means there are 7.88 billion different gender identities according to this theory. And it doesn't stop with just persons. There's a person right now named Ted Richards, who's in the United Kingdom, who identifies trans species. He identifies as a parrot, and he's surgically had his ears removed. He's had tattoos all over his face. He lives in a cage-like atmosphere and eats pet food, but he'll claim, I'm my authentic self now. And so ultimately what this is doing, it's not just I can be any type of human being I want, it's I can literally be whoever I want to be. So where did all of this come from? Where did this ideology or this mentality come from? Well, first things first, the fall. John Paul II in his Theology of the Body reveals that in the fall there were 4 unities that have been fractured or wounded. There was perfect harmony between God and man in the beginning, perfect harmony. There's perfect harmony between man and woman, between man and all of creation, and lastly, between man and his body and soul. Body and soul were in perfect harmony, and we know this. They were naked and they felt no shame. This unity of body and soul. And there's a fracture of our body and soul. And right now, the gender ideology is one fruit of that. It's a huge fruit of that, but it's one fruit of that because we can take it all the way back to in the beginning of Christ. A lot of heresies that were going on was one called Gnosticism, Manichaeism, and to sum these up, it basically said earth, creation, body is evil. And in order to be free, we have to be liberated. We have to escape the body. These were early heresies right after Jesus Christ died and rose from the dead. Another French philosopher coined the term when addressing identity or anthropology, the human person. He said, I think, therefore I am. That the body is a machine that I'm in, and so what's my true identity? My thought. All right? So these theories have been creeping in, and a couple big ones to note. Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, Germany in the 1800s, they recognized we need equality. We need to eliminate the class distinction. And the most fundamental class distinction, they thought, was male and female. And they thought the woman and her fertility was enslaved to men. And a popular feminist named Shulamith Firestone took up Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels' ideas. And she was born in a home where she was abused, where her dad told her, I'm gonna kill you. And she would yell back, I'm gonna kill you first. She said, I was abused by my brother. I hated masculinity. And she literally wrote this: the end goal of the feminist revolution must be not just the elimination of male privilege, but of the sex distinction itself. Genital differences between human beings would no longer matter culturally. The tyranny of the biological family and woman's fertility would be broken. Shulamith Firestone was delusional. She was disowned by her parents and she had schizophrenia. And sadly, how she died was she thought she was being poisoned in her food and she was starved to death in her apartment. This is a woman, like all of us, but more severely, has come from a broken home where the idea of feminine nature, woman, female, is enslavement. It's a trap. And the only way to be free from this is to escape biology. So these are some major fruits that I just wanted to show you, because this idea of the body and soul being separated is not something new, right? It goes back to the beginning of time. It's known as dualism, this separation of body and soul, dualism. Now let's look at the medical field. So that's kind of more philosophical roots. Now let's turn to the medical field. There was a man named Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld. It's a big name. Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld. He was a physician and sexologist, and he founded the Institute for Sexual Sciences in Berlin, Germany in 1919. And he was really one of the first people, early 1900s, that experimented with surgery, sex reassignment surgery, mastectomies, and all that. And this man named Dr. Harry Benjamin, who was in the United States, invited Dr. Magnus to come to the United States to do a big United States tour on his findings and his research on sex reassignment surgery. And so he went all over the place. And Dr. Harry Benjamin, he wanted to start a research group on this here in the United States because it was illegal. You couldn't do this in the United States if you wanted to amputate certain parts of your body. And a person on this research team, his name was Dr. John Money. And Dr. John Money was really the one who popularized this term gender identity, gender role, gender expression. And this was ultimately his philosophy. He said this: there's no real sexes, there's no male and female. Everything is nurture. In other words, if I was born a boy, but I was raised as a girl, I would go into girl stereotypes. I would be attracted to guys. All of it is nurture, is what he said. John Money. So John Money helped found the gender clinic at Johns Hopkins Hospital in 1966. And he wrote his dissertation on hermaphrodism. So he was all about psychology, nothing with medicine. And what he would do with his students, and I'm just going to say it because this is just the reality, is he would show them videos of child pornography, bestiality. He even rationalized pedophilia. He rationalized incest. This is Dr. John Money's kind of philosophy. And one day, there was a couple named Ron and Jeanette Reimer who got married at a young age, 20, 21 years old. And they gave birth, she gave birth, to two boys, twins, named Bruce and Brian. Bruce and Brian suffered from phimosis, which made it difficult to urinate. And at 8 months old, they didn't know what to do, so they met with a doctor, and the doctor said, there's an easy procedure that's going to help your babies, and that is circumcision. And so they set up the procedure, and the first one to go was Bruce. And Bruce's penis was cut off on total accident, and they were shocked. They had no idea what to do. And so with such trauma, their other baby boy did not have the surgery, and they went home and they didn't know how to raise this boy because of this accident that happened with circumcision. And so they're sitting back and they're watching the TV and the news, and John Money pops on the screen, and he's talking about his research. He's talking about that nature is meaningless to masculinity and femininity, and that it's all about nurture. And they're seeing all of this, and so what do? They send him a letter, and they have a meeting with Dr. John Money. This is going to be perfect for Dr. John Money, he's thinking. And so what he told the parents was, listen, this is what's going to happen. We're going to create a fake vagina, is what he told his parents, and we are going to socially condition your baby boy to be a girl. And trust me, he says, your baby girl is going to go on marrying a man. Sadly, she won't have kids, but everything is going to be totally okay. And the parents did not want to do this, but they imagined their baby boy growing up, and they didn't know what to do, and so they said, all right, we'll do it. Years go by. The name was now Brenda, is what the parents named their child. Dr. John Money, 5-10 years into it, told thousands of academics, thousands of doctors and scholars, and said, this works. I'm right. And he even said falsely that the parents are doing well, Brenda is doing well. All along, the mom was suicidal, was committing adultery. The father became an alcoholic. And Brenda was already threatening to commit suicide at an early childhood age. And John Money would take both of the twins and sexually abuse them. And at 15 years old, because all along Brenda did not feel like a girl, because Brenda's not a girl, Brenda's a boy. And at 15 years old, yelled at the doctor while they were doing procedure and said, no, I don't want to be a girl. And finally they came out and they said, you were never a girl. You were always a boy, and told the whole entire story. And Brenda rechanged his name to David as a sign of David conquering Goliath, the trauma that he went through. But sadly, due to the woundedness of this family, one of the twins, Brian, died from overdose and alcoholism at a young age. And at 39 years old, David took his life. It wasn't till the 1979 that all of this exposure with Dr. John Money finally came to the surface, and the clinic, Johns Hopkins Clinic, was closed. But 6 years ago, in 2017, it was reopened. There has been a huge paradigm shift because of Dr. John Money and his influence. This is from the ASA, the American Psychiatric Association. Before 1965, a person who came to a doctor and said, I feel like I'm in the wrong body, they classified this, the experts classified this as delusion. In 1980, they changed the wording to a disorder. In 2013, it is now known as gender dysphoria. And in 2019, this is the World Health Organization, gender incongruence. But what is dysphoria and incongruence saying now in the psychiatric field is that separation, if you feel like you're in the wrong body, that's normal. But the feeling of distress, the feeling of anxiety is not normal. Does that make sense? What has shifted before in 1980 and 1965, what they said was it's not normal if you feel like you're in the wrong body. Instead, we have to conform the mind to the body, not conform the body to the mind. So in 2013, there has been the shift that this separation, according to the APA, is normal. The distress is what is not normal. And so suggestions are we put you on puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, sex reassignment surgery to try to conform the body, and then perhaps that distress will go away. What people don't know is the effects of what all of these things are. So I just want to give you a rundown in case you don't know this. If a 7-year-old in certain, I'm not going to say all doctors, but in some cases, if a 7-year-old says to a doctor, hey, I'm feeling this way, the doctor will say, you need to socially transition, and that will help your distress go away. What's socially transition? Maybe change your name, maybe change your dress, maybe change how you talk. And that can happen at any age. Puberty blockers, right now medically, in certain states, start at 8 to 10 years old. And I just want to point out a lie that's being told is this. We'll put you on puberty blockers, and if you want to go off of them, if they're not working, you can get off of them. That's a lie, because 90 to 100% of every person who goes on puberty blockers goes to cross-sex hormones. And if a person goes to cross-sex hormones after puberty blockers, the person is sterilized for life. That person will never, ever be able to get pregnant. I'm going to say that one more time. If a person goes on puberty blockers, the studies show it's a domino effect. 90 to 100%, they'll go to cross-sex hormones, and they will be sterilized for life. And for women, if they're on puberty blockers for a few years, the doctors will say, we need to surgically remove your ovaries because the risk of cancer skyrockets for women. So 8 to 10 years old for puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, 13 to 14 years old. Right now in some states, top surgery, mastectomies, are happening at 13 years old and bottom surgeries at 15 years old. And the World Professional Association for Transgender Health in 2022 deleted all minimum age requirements. That's what they're pushing for. I will say this though, there are some people in the World Professional Association for Transgender Health are beginning to see the side effects of puberty blockers and are showing that the evidence is becoming more negative. I just want to briefly share with you some of the negative side effects. If a woman has a mastectomy, the removal of her healthy breasts, she will never be able to breastfeed again. A common claim is, hey, we can remove them, but then we can put them back and you can have breasts back again if you so choose. That's not true. That's not true. The woman will never be able to breastfeed again. So you might be thinking, okay, how has this expanded so much? There's really who began this funding is billionaires. One of the main ones is Martine Rothblatt, I believe is how you pronounce her name. She's a billionaire, the highest paid CEO, and she's an advocate for this. And so what we see is we're seeing government power is one of the reasons why. Another reason why is money from pharmaceutical companies. One of them being TAP Pharmaceuticals in 2001 was fined $875 million using illegal practices to entice physicians to use Lupron, which is one of the drugs given for puberty blockers, also given to sex offenders, and it was the biggest fraud settlement in US history. So for some pharmaceutical companies, this is a moneymaker. And lastly, they want it's an ideology, it's a vision of the human person in the world that they want to push on people. So these people will say to countries that are poor, hey, you need educational resources, don't you? And they'll say, yes. Well, we'll give them to you for free. And what are in these resources is books that propose this gender ideology. I also learned from Dr. Mary Hassan, who I'm sharing you this information with. Dr. Mary Hassan, founder of Person and Identity Project, she said this, and this kind of opened my eyes and made me realize why a lot of public schools are having to implement all of this. It's because the Human Rights Campaign, they have a strategy. They contact the Fortune 500 companies and they'll tell them, if you aren't on board with this gender ideology, that anyone can be whoever they want to be. If you're not on board, we're going to sue you. We're going to come after you, and you'll have a ton of lawsuits on your hand. The American Civil Liberties Union contacts public schools, and they'll say, if you're not complying with this gender ideology, we're going to sue you to the public schools. So there is a lot of money at play here to spread this ideology. But I will say, Sweden, Finland, the UK, Norway, other countries as well, they're doing a U-turn with this. The biggest clinic, the biggest gender clinic in all the world has shut down due to the lack of evidence that this is showing for improvement. A lot of people will also say, the trans community, the LGBT community, they have a high suicide rate. And I've had people even tell me, if we don't affirm and let them transition, the suicide rate will go up. The best studies done say this. The first year or so, if a person has surgery to appear as the opposite sex, the first year, there's not a whole lot of evidence. But the study that was done on 6,000 over a span of 30 years, right, says that 19 times more likely for suicide, and female to male isolated, it's a 40 times more likely. And what the evidence says is we can't state that surgery leads to suicide, but that surgery does not reduce the risk of self-harm that pre-existed. And a lot of detransitioners are coming out. They're saying, this didn't work. And there was a big study, I know I'm throwing a lot of studies to you, and this is the last one I'm throwing to you, because a lot of people say they're being discriminated against. There was the best study done on why a person detransitioned. 18% of them said financial reasons. Like I said before, a person who has surgery, they will be a medicalized patient for the rest of their life. Tens and thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. 18%, that's one of the reasons. Social support was 17%, and discrimination was 7%. The remaining, the highest reason why a person detransitioned was because it didn't change my mental illness. It didn't change the dysphoria, the distress that I was feeling. That is the main reason why. So all this being said, I asked Dr. Mary Hasson, who's probably the leading expert in the church right now on this topic. I asked her, you know what? What's the root? Like if you could say, there's these ideologies, there's the medical field. What is the root? Where is this truly coming from? And she said, the Enlightenment, which rejected God. It was all reason, science, intellect, but it was a rejection of God. Once you lose God, you lose the creature, you lose truth, aka relativism, and you lose the good. If there is no God, gender ideology makes sense. There's no God. But if there is a God and we are his creature, then he is the one who reveals to us who we truly are. For without the creator, Vatican II Council says, the creature would disappear. When God is forgotten, the creature itself grows unintelligible. There are people out there, maybe you know some, who are struggling with their identity. In some degree, we all. But these are people out there, people are struggling. And so what I just shared with you, yes, I wanted to share some facts. I wanted to teach you a little bit about this to kind of bring that to the light. And a lot of it can be shocking, but there are real people who are struggling with this. And so I just want to say a quick prayer for all of them. May the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, Lord Jesus Christ, I pray that any person right now who might be wrestling with their identity, with their body, that they may know that they are loved, that they are seen, and that they can trust you. That they can trust you because you are perfect love. Teach us, Lord, how to love as you love, to walk and accompany those who might be struggling. In Jesus' name, amen. In the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.